Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Decline Invite. I'm your host, the extroverted IT leader, Ryan Drumheller. Today's conversation is about leadership, not the kind that you read about, the kind that is built in real environments, under pressure, where decisions actually matter. Today, I'm joined by Chris Farr. Chris has spent over 2 decades in IT and MSP leadership. He's been working in environments where things don't go according to plan, where the systems break, where teams are under pressure, and where leadership actually gets tested. He's led through growth, through complexity, and through the kind of situations that don't show up in a playbook. What stands out about Chris is his focus, his discipline, execution, and clarity. Not over engineering, not theory, but what actually works and when you're responsible for results. So thanks, Chris, for joining us today. It's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So the first thing I always like to do is just kind of get into a little bit of an icebreaker. So what's one leadership buzzword that you'd retire immediately?
I think it would have to be more of a phrase, the move fast and break things. I mean, that's something that's always been said. I think it's better to move intentionally and fix what matters.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're just moving to move and you're not actually planning to fix along the way, it's kind of like that Band-Aid approach, so to speak. So what's an invite you decline now that you didn't earlier in your career?
Really jumping into every fire, every escalation, just grabbing hold of every single thing, and then, that really creates dependency. It really kind of hinders growth, especially for other people on the team as well. And not in the fact of like meaning that you're ignoring it by not signing up for every single fire, that comes about. But, just stepping back and asking, am I the right person to even solve this problem? Or should I be, kind of delegating, elevating, to kind of help other people solve the problems?
Yeah, absolutely. And by delegating, sometimes you're helping them, kind of upskill and step up, so to speak. And if you're handling it all the time, are they learning anything? So, yeah, I mean, everything you said for sure. What's something that people misunderstand about MSP leadership?
They really think that MSP is all about the tech. And it is at the end of the day. I mean, that's kind of the bread and butter, but really tech is just the product, that's being brought to the table. The leadership is the actual operating system, of what really matters. So that's the biggest miss on what people, kind of get wrong as far as the MSP world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that almost anybody I ever speak to, well, MSP is immediately technologies.
Right.
That's a good perspective for sure. So let's go ahead and transition a little bit and speak a little bit about you and your career. What originally pulled you into IT?
Really just liking the fact of troubleshooting and learning how things work. That really it kind of attracted me, early on. And it's one of those professions where there's never the same thing twice, especially early on in your career, when you're in the weeds and you're in the trenches, so to speak. And you're down there doing the wrench turning and trying to figure out why something's not working the way it was supposed to, or even the way it worked an hour ago, and peeling back that onion and just seeing how all those layers kind of come together. That's kind of intriguing. So that way, you're never just doing one particular job every single day. So it kind of keeps it interesting. And that's what got me attracted to the industry.
Yeah, I mean, for better or worse, right? Like, and some days it's a grind, but in a lot of other days you learn something new, and it's fantastic.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I echo that from my standpoint. So what's changed the most for you over the last 20 plus years?
Honestly, going from the basic break fix, where that was the what was important to most people, where if their computer's slow or their printer won't print, just those basic things. And then it kind of pivoted, years ago, to being where technology is kind of on the forefront of the business. And as you're trying to plan and where you're wanting to go and things you're wanting to put into place this day and time, with people spread out, across the globe or across the country, just making sure you got the infrastructure in place to be able to bridge that gap and to get, from A to B. So before it was just mainly, do you have somebody who can fix your computer? And now it's, who do I have at my leadership team table, or who on my team can help me guide this business, to the direction it needs to go? So it became really more of just kind of on the back burner, just one of those necessary evils that you just kind of had to have, to do business, to be a more of, kind of leading the decisions that are made in the business.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought a little bit of that up because My next question sets it up perfectly. So, when did IT shift from support to strategy in your mind?
It's kind of been leading that way through the bulk of my career, kind of slowly. Yeah, I've just kind of seen that kind of take fold. But I would say in the past, probably 10 years or so, it's really become more of a strategy move, just the more things have gotten more global. And, especially and then when people started working remote, a lot more, it made it where you really needed those IT infrastructures in place to be able to make those people able to even be able to be at work, whether that's a cloud environment, or whether that's, just making sure that you've got the proper utilities in place to allow them to remote into your office.
Yeah, no, I couldn't say it any better. So, what did you get wrong early in your leadership career that you would look back on now and go, yeah, maybe I'd do it differently?
Really just, it kind of goes back to kind of the first question that you asked about, things to decline, and just taking hold of every single thing where, when you go from being in the trenches and actually doing the physical work and then moving into a leadership role, you still kind of hold on to some of those traits that you've got, and trying to do a lot yourself instead of delegating and pushing down to the next level or to different people who are better suited to do that. They're in a role for a certain reason and you're in your role for a certain reason. So really just learning how to let go. That's the hardest thing to do, right? When you become a leader and you become a manager, it's just learning when to let go. Also, and on the other side of that coin, learning when not to let go. Just trying to walk that tightrope to make sure you're giving enough where you need to, but still holding back some of the things that you really need to keep on your plate.
Yeah, I mean, there's no manager playbook unless you go find a book or you got a mentor or somebody typically at a lot of these places. But that is exactly that. And most of the bad stories you hear is where they tilt too far in either direction. And that's just trial by fire, learning your team, learning your environment. Uh, yeah, it's a tightrope, as you said.
That's it. Every team's different too. So, like there's no right or wrong way to do it. You just got to find what works for you and your team and then make it work. It's kind of an airplane you're building in mid flight. You're constantly changing things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a great analogy. So you've spent a lot of time in the MSP space, and there's a big gap between average and great. What separates a great MSP from an average?
I think what separates them is the trust that you bring or the trust that you're able to withstill into your clients. Because just because you could be a great MSP as far as fixing the problem that's right in front of them, like I mentioned, the slow computer or not being able to print or the servers down, just because you can do that, that's great. But if you can't bring, or if the MSP that you're working with can't bring to the table that forward thinking and that CIO type role, that CTO role, that chief technology officer, if they can't bring those skills to the table to help kind of guide your business and scale your business, they're kind of missing the mark, on that. So if you're looking for an MSP, that's the first thing I would recommend is you need those break fix and that those technicians and those engineers. That's you need that, and that's important. But you want to make sure they've got the expertise too that can kind of help, be a partner with you, to kind of break that vendor mentality and be more of a partner.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many vendors that will just do, right? Like, you call them up, they'll do that, no problem. But to find somebody who's actually going to be embedded and be for your best interest in your company and like you said, work together for the outcome that needs to actually happen for that particular business to get to where they want to get to. Yeah, you need a partner. It's pretty rare, and it's great to hear that is a perspective that you're coming from for sure. So, why do so many MSPs plateau from your point of view?
Well, it goes into play with that. It's just they kind of they lose sight of the mark, and don't move with the way the environment and the landscape's going. I mean, for example, if they don't grasp on to the cybersecurity the tools and the cybersecurity training that's available that could be pushed down to clients, they're kind of missing that mark. So if they're only doing just the basic things that a typical MSP would have done years ago, they're just going to plateau. They're not really going to grow anymore because that's they people need that, businesses need that, but they need so much more now. So if that's all you're doing and you just plateau at that point and you're not ever bettering yourself and then in turn bettering your employees and your technicians to be able to do and be able to fix problems, that's on the landscape now, you really have nowhere to go. There's really no room for growth at that point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You'll always have to be constantly evolving, constantly, thinking, and then applying that and doing. Some of them just get caught up, I think.
Right.
routine, I guess, to be on a lighter tone on that.
Yeah, in this industry, it's always something different. It's always next year is going to be different. And you really, you can predict some of it. You can see some coming down the pike, and what to expect. But I mean, just the way technology is growing and as fast as it's growing this day, you really don't know what's coming down 2 or 3 years from now. So you really got to adapt, and kind of just get on the bandwagon, basically, and just, accept it, grasp it, learn the technology, because the different businesses are going to look to you, to be able to bring that guidance and that expertise. So just kind of staying on top of things, just staying up on what's going on, looking at trends, and then building your MSP and your environment, around what's coming, without losing touch of what got you there in the first place, which is what we all need. Just fixing things when they break, still bringing that along as well.
Yeah, I mean, this time frame, like I look at the technology landscape and I go, can anybody actually actively come up with a 5-year plan right now? Like it is evolving so quickly, and I think like you have the best plan. Just stay on top of it as it's coming in, because that's about the best that we can do, and then try to actually predict, and just be that honest with it. Like everyone's seeing AI everywhere, AI everything. And we're testing the waters with how far it can and cannot go, so to speak. I've heard just today 2 crazy stories of AI probably shouldn't done, and then exposed a little bit of so some company let some AI agents go and unwatched really, and it deleted ton of data at the end of the day, and no knowledge of any backups. Like they talking to customers, their company is probably in a little bit of a trouble spot right now. And I'm like, at one point, did you went ahead and let an AI agent go, right? Like they're eventually going to train themselves and end up probably doing something a bit different than what you wanted. So that's a little bit of a red flag. But two, where's your backups? Like
Yeah, the most
what's
important thing.
happening? Right.
I
So
know,
yeah,
but here lately, people put things in the cloud and just expect them, that's their backup, quote unquote. Never not having to have it down the hall in a server room. But yeah, that's great, and they probably have redundancy, but they don't care about your data. They're protecting their servers and their infrastructure. You just happen to have your stuff in their environment. It's still up to you to keep it backed up somewhere. Don't have your eggs in one basket.
yeah, I'm sure we could talk about, backup horror stories an entire podcast. But so somewhere along the line of my research, I found that you've talked about busy versus valuable. What does that actually mean?
Well, especially in the tech world and the MSP world, I mean, you could be busy just because you've got a ton of service tickets coming in. But those service tickets could be things that could be fixed by more efficient, but just by being more efficient, by putting things in place to keep those from coming down, the same issue coming, back to back. So just because you're busy really doesn't mean that you're valuable at the end of the day. The true value comes from the technician and the technology company who can fix the things from happening all around. It's one of those where somebody sends in a ticket and says, "Hey, I'm having this problem." Okay, that's great. You fixed that one problem, but what did you do? What did you do to keep it from coming back next week or next month or even coming back later today from another employee at that company? So just because you're busy putting out fires and fixing problems, it's really not solving the root cause. So yeah, busy is good, to keep you busy throughout the day to keep things going. But just because you're busy, it doesn't mean much, if you're not really doing anything to prevent anything.
Yeah, good to be busy as a business, but
Right.
valuable to turn it into profits, right? Like couldn't agree more. So when does an MSP become a strategic partner instead of just support?
It comes that way when you're able to build that relationship as a partner and not a vendor. And so when you get the trust of the business owners and the people on the leadership teams at these small to medium businesses that you're doing, or these K-12s that you're doing, or the different type of vectors that you're working with, when you become more of a trusted advisor and you're more of an insertion on their leadership team, then that's when you really become that. And so that's really what you need to strive for, from the MSP world, because like I mentioned earlier, just because you can fix that basic problem, if you're not solving those problems for them as far as moving the business forward, there'll be somebody else that will be doing that. So, you really need to bring all that to the table and be able to to help them out too, fix problems and move it forward. Because if you don't, you're not doing them a real service either. You're kind of doing them a disservice because they may even be looking at you and going, you may have this skill or you may have this service, but you're not giving me that. So therefore, they're just moving along thinking everything's great. But if you're not helping them on that forward looking, you're really just not helping them at the end of the day.
Yeah, couldn't say it any better. It makes absolute sense. So let's talk about leadership where it actually matters when things aren't going well. Why do you focus on discipline over motivation?
Because with discipline, if you stick to the plan and you stick to at least the basic footprint that you've got out there of where you want to go, that keeps you, that really would keep you motivated at the end of the day. Because if you stay disciplined, you're going to start seeing results. And if you start seeing results, that in itself will motivate you. It will motivate the team as well and just keep things moving forward. Because just because you're motivating somebody, if you don't have that end goal in mind or you don't have that same common purpose that we're all working towards, the motivation, I mean, what are you really motivating for? Just making them happy, just making people happy for just coming to work every day. Where I think, just things I've seen throughout the years and just with different teams is that if you're all disciplined in the common goal and whatever that is, it can vary, company to company or even, quarter to quarter. But as long as you stay disciplined and you keep your eye on the ball, that usually brings motivation in with it. Not to say that you don't need to pat people on the back and, give them motivation, when things are going well. But I think that discipline outweighs just pure motivation without the discipline every day.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to not have discipline. So, I mean, I think that if you can kind of get that into your routine and be disciplined every day, be the rock, so to speak, does lead the motivation, right? It does rally the troops. It does make everybody go, oh, okay, well, he's unbothered. He's leading us through this hard time, this rough time. They don't have to see what happens in the back, the back room, the back office or whatever. But yeah, I mean, you kind of have to rewire your brain a little bit, but yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. So what does leadership look like on a bad day?
It really looks like staying calm when everything around you is spinning, and just stay in the course, and just, even though you may not have all the answers, during that middle of chaos, in the middle of that chaos, it's just owning the problem and finding the solution, and just staying steadfast with it. And so, if people see, you doing that, it'll make everybody else kind of feel a little more calm as well. Where, yeah, you may not know the answer, but we're going to find the answer. We're going to find it together. We're going to move through this and just make sure that we put this fire out and simmer this chaos down.
Absolutely. To echo that, yeah, I've absolutely been in situations where, yeah, bad situation, maybe somebody made a mistake, and maybe your senior executives point blank asked me who did it. And that's where the leadership and traits come into play because my response is, well, I did it. It's, I'm leading the team. I'll take care of the problem. We'll make sure things get put in place, whatever it is. And maybe even in that situation, we don't know as leaders yet what actually happened or what's going on, right? We're answering to, talk about what's currently going on, but I don't know necessarily what the conclusion is. And it would be such a mistake to throw a name and maybe put somebody under that bus, right? When at the end of the day, I'm leading that team. So as a leader, couldn't agree more to what you said. And being in those situations myself, I feel every pain of my trauma, at least coming through.
Right.
And just trying to keep that face, right? Trying to be the rock that leads them to the other side, the better outcome. And it's okay that things happen at the end of the day. We learn from them, we get better from them, and we try not to have the same mistake twice.
And it speaks volumes to the team as well. When you have their back and, you take ownership, like you said, I mean, at the end of the day, you're in charge of that team. You've been put in charge, of that project, of those people, whatever the case may be. And, as long as they know that you've got their back, and you're going to have that radical responsibility, so to speak, that you're going to be able to lead them so much better. Because then, like, when these things do happen, when the chaos comes and everything goes sideways, they're going to work with you to help get through that as well. So they're going to have your back, you've got their back, and at the end of the day, I mean, the buck stops with whoever's in charge.
And I could have another whole podcast on just the right way to lead. And I totally agree with a lot of these because that's what it should be. Absolutely. So You said communication matters more than perfection. Why that take?
Well, really, nobody's going to be perfect. Everybody's going to have a bad day. Everybody's going to fail. Everybody's going to do something the wrong way, make a mistake, whatever the case may be. And especially when you're working with it, when you're the client, especially. You're going to you're going to, stub your toe, from time to time. But as long as you communicate through that, and as long as they know that you care and you got their back and they know that you've got their best interest at heart, they'll forgive most things that may come to be. They'll forgive that as long as you communicate and you're upfront with them and you just kind of keep them up to date, through the process. It's the same thing that I tell our technicians, that are coming up the ranks. You know, you're going to not solve somebody's problem at some point, or you're going to fail with a technical fix that you come out with, and you may think you've got it solved, and they get mad because tomorrow the same problem happens again. But as long as they know that you care and you're there for them and you're going to see it through, even if the problem comes back, they'll forgive you, your issue with the tech that you weren't able to fix. But if you don't communicate with them, that's hard to forgive at that point, because it could be something as simple as, their server's down and all they know is they're sitting there and can't work. They have employees they're paying who can't do any work. And you may be working as hard as you can behind the scenes, to get that back up and going. And you may do a great job in getting it back up and going within an hour, 2 hours, whatever the case is. But in their mind, they're just sitting there down and nobody's communicated with them. So that communication, just that's the biggest part, especially in the tech industry, where, and not communicating with technical jargon either, because, the people that you're communicating with, they're not in that world. So they also want things communicated to them in a way they can understand it, that makes sense. So that's where the communication comes into play. And that's one thing we instill into every technician. But you've got to be great at customer service from the communication standpoint, because that right there is going to save you, so many times when the fix that you put in place didn't work, or, wasn't, or needed to be redone, later on.
In the whole time that you're speaking, for sure, I couldn't agree more. I've made a whole career off what I call tech to English or tech to business, whatever that might be, in order to remember to put yourself in the other side's shoes. And for somebody who's 20 plus years in his career as well, you can show this story to them as well. Early in my career, I was a Linux tech. I remember running this script, was trying to update something. I don't quite remember what it was, but my senior had given it to me. He wrote it, assured it was good to go. I'm running the script. I'm on the phone with the customer while it's running it. I'm watching, it's like one of those movie situations where I'm watching the site disappear in front of me, because basically the script rm-rf, the entire server essentially, where we ended up having to restore from backup. But this person's in a panic. They're in a tizzy. I think I was towards the tail end of my shift. I stayed like late into the night. We're talking 2 a.m., 3 a.m., where they finally had to coax me and be like, it's okay to go home. You did everything. You kept on it. You sent, updates to say, hey, progress, we're at 70%, 80%, whatever that number was, so they could kind of understand that, yeah, we're still working on it. It's very slow. It's estimated maybe to be about, just terminology that they could understand. But at the same time, when it came, time to actually explain what happened, yeah, we missed something, in a particular script that we thought was good. We got to go back through and QI our stuff. That's on us, kind of thing. And that started with, on the top on down, and having that kind of communication in a bad situation that we cause. There's nothing worse than being on the phone with a situation like that. But the things that you do after that and follow up, and that's all that you can do, but that's what you would want to have happen if you were on the other side. And that's why I try to teach everybody, just like what you were saying, to put yourselves over there and make sure that they feel the most communicated with the entire way. I mean, that's really what you can do. Now, they still might not be happy at the end of the
Right.
day, but
Yep. As long as you over communicate, though, that's
yeah,
key. That's what we preach into our people, is just over communicate. You can't go wrong with that. Nobody's expecting perfection. They're just expecting that you care, that you communicate with them. And at the end of the day, yes, you've got to get the problem fixed, but, they'll forgive, a few slips here and there, as long as you communicate, over communicate, and just care about them, and just translate that geek speak to normal speak, and things will go a whole lot easier.
the day I can get a complaint about somebody over communicating from a support perspective, let me know, because it hasn't happened yet. And I would love to have it.
I would be glad to take that phone call.
Absolutely. So, what separates leaders who handle pressure well from those who don't?
Really just staying calm. I mean, it's all going back to that same mentality, but it's just staying calm during the chaos, during the storm, that we all know is coming. And just staying calm. Don't freak out. Just work through it. And because the more that you show and that you don't have it under control, the more your team is going to lose faith. And that's just going to trickle down. So that's the biggest part there. Just staying calm and realizing that you got it. You're going to get through it. It may not be the most pleasant way or the most pleasant experience as you're going through it, but also too, you'll come out of it. You'll learn something. You'll at least take something away. That it may not fix that particular problem the next time, but it'll save you, on something else.
Yeah, I mean, take a deep breath, right? And I think we all find ourselves in situations that are like, oh my, your mind starts wandering. You start to think that, it's going to be bad. And if you just take a deep breath and then lean back into the skills that you do know or the procedures that you have written, whatever it might be, and start enacting that, it's like, okay, well, bad, but can it be worse? Absolutely, it can be worse, but you're helping make everybody else feel better around it, and you're navigating through the pains. Yes, absolutely. I would echo that. And, as somebody who's had to learn that as well, I've absolutely had times where I look back now and I'm like, yeah, that wasn't nearly as bad, having been in worse since that, right?
Right. Just find that clarity. Somewhere in the midst of that chaos, there's clarity to be found.
Absolutely. And I think at this point, it's a great time to hear from our sponsor.
Hello, everyone. Ryan here from Stellarhorn. Let me take a quick second to talk to you about something I see all the time. Most businesses don't actually have a technology problem, they have a leadership problem. They've got systems, tools, even teams in place, but no clear direction, no strategy, and no one connecting technology to the business. That's exactly why I built Stellarhorn Group. I help organizations through fractional CIO leadership, advisory, and project based work, bringing executive level technology leadership without the full time CIO cost. Whether it's strategy, cybersecurity, AI governance, or leading critical initiatives, it's about helping you make better decisions, reduce risk, and actually move forward with confidence. If that sounds like something your organization is dealing with, please reach out. Let's have a conversation. Stellar Horn Group, rare leadership, real results. Technology leadership without the full-time CIO cost.
Now that we're back, let's shift into security and business impact. So, why do businesses still treat IT and security as a cost center?
A lot of them because they haven't had a catastrophic event. There hasn't been anything that's just been in the forefront of their mind that causes them to differentiate it. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people like that, a lot of businesses, that just view it just as the call center. But, this day and time, though, with just the cybersecurity stuff that's going on, and, most businesses are getting cybersecurity insurance, because their typical E&O insurance, their business insurance doesn't cover catastrophic cyber events. And, a lot of them now, that's what's bringing a lot of businesses to the table with that changed mindset is because they get these questionnaires from these insurance companies, where they're having to check boxes and say, yes, they do this or no, they don't do this. And it's things that, it's not in their wheelhouse. It's things, the terminology that we talked about earlier, they don't understand the jargon. And so they lean on an IT, either a person on their staff or, outsource to an MSP or a consultant to help fill those questions, to help, fill those, with those, the other side of that is most of the time, you've got to put tools in place or training in place to be able to satisfy all those requirements, just to get insurance. So that's having a big shift on businesses now of changing it from that cost center mentality. So there's still a lot that do think that, but a lot of them get humbled real quick when they get that questionnaire from the insurance company.
Yeah, that's been one of the biggest things I've been championing and throwing out there is IT and security doesn't have to be a cost center. They can actually save you money and, so to speak, gain you money. And one of those things is exactly what you're talking about right now is a lot of companies still haven't learned yet that cybersecurity insurance is kind of morphed more into like you have to have X, Y, and Z in place or you're not getting insured. There might be varying levels of that, but you don't want to be caught in a situation where all of a sudden I need it and you weren't anywhere near checking that box to prove that you had anything. So now there's no money. And, if you're ransomware or, whatever at that point, do you have a business
Right.
at this point? And as scary as that sounds, it should be taken seriously so that they do come to, MSPs and, other partners to make sure that they're actually in a situation to be able to have a protected business.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of these, small to medium businesses, they think that they're too small to have a cyber event, but they're not. They just may be too small to wind up on the national news. But really, the small to medium business world, especially when you're working, you're doing business in a small community. These are people that you've got to see at the grocery store. These are people you see at church, at different places. And if you were to have a cyber event where, your client's information got leaked out, or whatever the case is in your world, that could be bigger and more catastrophic than a Fortune 500 company, having that happen to them. So yeah, a lot of them, they could go out of business due to that, without the proper cyber insurance in place. At the end of the day, the insurance companies, like every insurance company, they're looking for ways not to pay claims. Everybody's, trying to make money, and so you really, just because that you answer the questions, if you don't have the protocol in place and, stay that course and make sure that, your procedures and your policies stay up to date and you do have a catastrophic day, you don't even know if that policy is going to get, going to get paid or not, or that claim is going to get paid. And that's one thing we tell our clients, if you sign up with us, we put the protocols in place, we help you fill that document out. We'll never promise you that you're not going to have a bad day. Anything could happen. But what a good MSP can do is, promise you that if you have that bad day, we can make sure that claim gets paid because we can show that we put these things in place. You followed these protocols. You've got these procedures in place and you've got this training that you push down to your employees. And that checks all the boxes that you were legally required to do. So we can at least take that blast radius and make it much smaller. And that's what a good MSP, can do for you.
Yeah, and then talk about the stress off the customer's back at that point and the peace of mind, right? Like you said, things can happen, things probably will happen at some point. You just hope that it's smaller, not bigger. But having that partner, so to speak, be able to take care of all that jargon, take care of all the proof from the customer's perspective at that point to get it to the insurance company, because I don't know who's dealt with an insurance company and had a great experience and a great time, but having that all taken care of for them, so to speak, I mean, that's the thing to come out of this, right? Is they have peace of mind, their business is back. They, at least in the communities like you mentioned, they can show, I know we signed up for everything. Yeah, we had a blip. We had to take the site down and we had to go to paper for a day, a week, whatever it was, but we absolutely have proof, and that's why we got the insurance money to take care of it. And that's why we're back on top and keep that trust, that value. There's nothing worse than being in a company where it's all on trust and you lose the trust. There's nothing worse than that.
Right.
So, what are the most common gaps you're seeing right now in the technical industry?
The biggest gap is just not embracing the cybersecurity landscape, that is much as you really need to do that. Because again, it goes back to, just not seeing the urgency in it, until something does happen, and that's gotten more clients to us as well. It's ones that have already had that bad day and, and didn't have protocols in place, to be able to protect them or get things in there, or even as something as simple as not having a backup in place. And at that point, it was the wrong IT people they were dealing with, the wrong company, or they were trying to do it internally and just didn't have the expertise. And so really just, missing the gap as far as how much IT and technology is needed to make your business run and to make your business just more efficient as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said it recently that a lot of tooling out there is really easy to get into and use. So I can set up my Google account real easy. It's pretty simple. But do you know how to actually secure it from that point on outside of just a password? Or you're talking about having the right backups in place and not just inside of Google, right? Like, boom, we got it. Well, what happens when Google's down? I mean, rarity, but what happens when they have the blips or whatever, or things do get lost? Well, there you go. The pain is met. So I don't think a lot of businesses take into account until something happens, right? Like whether it's a scar or a new piece of business where now they have to do a particular audit, or, now they're going to do international deals where something triggers where then they'll start taking it seriously. Where my big endeavor has been, if you think you're going to do it in a year, now's the time to start, right? Like you
Right.
get everything in order, make sure that going into whatever that big event might be in a year, you're good to go. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're in a situation where you have to absolutely hire an entire firm to do it yet. You might be able to hire, say, an MSP or anybody else to come in and do an assessment to figure out, like, is there something that you need to do? Can you pay now the MSP to go ahead and take that off your plate on an assessment basis? And then maybe in a year or whatever it is, when you get to there, now if the MSP came in, did you solid, you're probably bound to pick that phone back up and go with that trusted advisor again and be like, hey, Steve, you did me solid. You're still working at the MSP, right? Like a great relationship. You're in it to help the actual company itself, and now twice you've helped them, right? Like a lot of businesses, I don't think take that into account, that there are multiple ways before you have to just fully, pay whatever it is. In their minds, insurmountable amounts of money. But there are multiple ways that you can walk it up to that and be better than you self-managing it, I guess.
Yeah, and a good MSP, a good, technical advisor, whichever role you go with, if you pick a good one, they'll be able to scale with you, so the bigger
Right.
you get and the more needs that you have, they should have that expertise and those tools, in-house to be able to help bridge those gaps, it just gets you to that next level. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, it's not a one size fits all, for anybody. Everybody's got their own needs. They're at different stages business wise. And so there's different flavors of it, that can be offered to different types of businesses, regardless of whichever, path they're on, or, whichever season that they're in as far as their business.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing is starting early with somebody like that. That means you have somebody throughout now. You at least have somebody you can go to where you didn't before. And I think that's an important relationship aspect that business owners probably don't think about right away, but now we're putting it out there. So how do you translate technical risk into something business leaders actually understand?
Well, it goes into play as far as, if your systems are completely down, or, whether that's because just by hardware failure, or, it is a cyber event. If your employees are sitting there with nothing to do because they can't use the technology to get their job done, I mean, how much are you losing at that point? And so, one of the questions we'll ask business owners is, if you were down for one full day, how much money are you losing at that point? If you couldn't do any work that day, and when you take into account salaries and just whatever, missed opportunities that you may miss just due to the systems being down, how much are you losing? And so usually, when you take that number and, you start multiplying it, that really is an eye opener, because they kind of look at it and go, well, yeah, if this is down, we can't do business. Our employees are still going to want to get paid, but there's no output being done. So that really kind of changes the conversation from that standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, putting it into dollars and cents, how much are you losing that day? I think that's something that they can understand for sure.
Right.
So a lot of organizations are still stuck reacting instead of leading. Why do so many organizations stay reactive?
I think it's because, number one, they may not have somebody that they trust to be able to lead them, in the way that it needs to be led from that IT standpoint. So you're being more just reactive to, my email's down. Okay, let's get somebody to fix that email. Or this printer's not working down the hall. Let's get somebody to fix that printer. Where if you look at it from the big picture, you can just, bridge it and say, okay, well, here's what we need to do, as far as you need new switches, or you need a new server, or you need to move this to the cloud, or, you need better infrastructure. And so, then you start looking at it, kind of goes back to that money conversation too. It's like, how much money are you spending by just putting a band-aid on this one problem and being reactive to this one issue that keeps coming up? When if you just fix the root problem, and just, maybe have to rip and replace a lot more, but it's going to save you a ton of money, over the years, because you're going to get more longevity out of that equipment that you're purchasing. You're going to be more efficient because your employees aren't having to sit on the phone with an IT provider or just sit there and wait for it to get fixed. And again, goes back to lost revenue, and you're just sitting there having to pay an employee to wait on a technician to fix a problem. Where if you're a little less reactive, more proactive, so you could get around all of that and then focus your attention from a technology standpoint on moving the business forward on whatever goals that are set, and wherever you're planning on going, rather than just having to just do constant firefighting.
Yeah, I think that the rewiring of the brain there is a huge part. They see that the instant, lower cost to put the band-aid in place instead of the bigger fix that might be more right now. But like you said, over time, the band-aid has caused how many things that might be more than the fix itself. And it might have cost how much in lost revenue along the way. Those are the things that are hard, I think, to measure. But when you can actually articulate that and show the business, I hope that they start lining up to go, oh, okay, maybe we need to trust, listen, react a little bit more instead of just throwing the band-aid on, like you said.
Right. And that kind of goes into play with the communication, just over
Hmm.
communicating those things, especially if you're in there dealing with a client, that's in that scenario, just communicating that, and not just saying, hey, this needs to be fixed. Okay, well, why does it need to be fixed? Painting that picture for them, put it in words and, in just ways that everybody can understand. And usually if you do that, everybody winds up on the same page, and it starts making sense and you just get more clarity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what does strategic IT actually look like?
Strategic IT is getting ahead of the curve before it actually comes, and whether that's threats, which is, what we monitor more now, just what's coming down the pike that we need to protect people against. And then also just staying ahead of it as far as from a strategic standpoint, as far as what tools are out there to make your employees more efficient. So it's kind of twofold. So you really need somebody who can look at it from both aspects and look at it from the betterment of the business side to what can we do to make the business better, make the employees better, more efficient, drive more revenue, and then also to keep you protected too, to make sure that, things that are coming down the pike and things that are out there, making sure you're protected before you're just being again reactive to whatever situation gets thrown your way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how do you reduce chaos instead of just responding to it?
Reducing it goes back to try to finding that root cause of what's happening, because there's always going to be that random chaos that you can't plan for, things that are just going to pop up that you just got to fix and you just got to deal with, just got to move through it. But if you can fix the root cause of most problems, it eliminates a lot of that chaos. I mean, something as chaotic as your whole business is down because your firewall went down or your router went down, so your internet is technically out. As far as you're concerned, just getting ahead of replacing that equipment and maintaining that equipment before that issue happens and before it gets chaotic where nobody can work. Just getting to that root cause ahead of time, just staying ahead of it. Smell smoke, so to speak, smell smoke before the fire happens.
So being that proactiveness, like there might
That,
be a
that's
theme here.
that's the theme of the game when it comes to IT. So over communicate and be proactive.
Absolutely. So what role does process and discipline play here?
Well, I mean, it kind of is. They go hand in hand because I mean, you've got to have processes in place to know, how are we doing things? Where are we wanting to go? What are we putting in place in order to get us there? So, having those processes that everybody's following, so we're all on the same page, so we're all using the same playbook, and then the discipline is just sticking with that. It's real easy to put a playbook in place and put your processes out there. But if you're not disciplined enough to follow them every single time, things are going to fall through the cracks. And so you've got to discipline yourself to stick with it, and also too to make changes to it when the document needs to be updated. Because the worst thing is going to documentation and it's a year old and things have been changed and there's been no change log, represented within that process. And so you really need to stay disciplined and keeping them up to date as well. That way, when you get new hires in, or you get new people or, whatever it is, you've got at least a polished book or at least a roadmap and a playbook that you can present to them and, say, this is how we do things. And you can train to that.
Yeah, I mean, you're speaking about every IT person's favorite thing to do at the
Document.
same time. Yeah, exactly. At the same time, what you just said is like you're giving new hires a chance, out of the gate, right? Because there's nothing worse than entering a new situation, trying to figure out how this particular organization does it, and then either not finding a document whatsoever because it doesn't exist, or you found it. Fred hasn't worked here in 2 years and no one's done it since, Fred left. Nothing worse than that. And yeah, my teams would chuckle for sure. And I say that in a nice way. But yeah, we would absolutely put things in place. Like that article would go into a system that would notify us X amount of times a year to make sure that we were at least reviewing that and making sure that it stayed in place. Or maybe this one isn't as critical. We can let it slide on the time gap a little bit and check it yearly instead of semi-annually or whatever it is, but at least making sure and then following through and doing it. And finding creative ways to make sure that the IT staff actually does that, I think, is important too. And it's not just like the low tier people, right? Even the senior people, it's even more critical, in my opinion, that the senior person looks at that, because then they can make sure that everything that follows that is actually accurate as well. If you're the senior, a junior person wrote it. If it's not, then help coach them. Now we've won on just one article. We're winning for the new hire, winning on the right documentation, we're winning on the person that just got trained, got upskilled. There's a lot that goes into that, I think.
There
So I
is.
echo.
And with the higher level engineers as well, it cuts down on the escalations that are going up to them. If it's something they're seeing day in and day out from a lower tier technician, why not write a knowledge base article for that, write a procedure for that to keep those escalations from coming. And like you said, it trains up the other tiers as well to be able to do things they weren't able to do before. They were just escalating it, and throwing it up. So yeah, it works great with that. And in the IT world especially, there's a lot of institutional knowledge that stays in people's brains, and trying to extract that and get them to document that. It is in a lot of ways it is like pulling teeth, because I mean they're in the middle of it, they're firefighting, they're fixing problems. But just coaching to the point where, hey, just step back. Okay, once you fix the problem, while it's fresh on your mind, document this, because 9 times out of 10 somebody's going to see this issue from another client, or even this same client in the near future, or a year down the road. So why not go ahead and document it, so that hour that it took you to fix it this first time takes the next person 10 minutes to do it. Makes us all more efficient, makes things flow a little bit better, and just pushes some of your knowledge down. So yeah, it's documentation is key. But yeah, it's always been a push and pull thing, especially in the IT industry, because it's so fast paced, and you're constantly doing something, you're changing gears, you're moving from one problem to another problem. But yeah, just coaching that's one of the biggest things we do as well, just to keep that top of mind. When you finish something, make sure it's documented, and make sure that documentation stays up to date.
Yeah, I can safely say that everything you just said is 100% accurate. And I had way more success, I think, with getting the documentation in like a project like fashion, because we would include it as part of the project. The project's not closed unless we come out of that with some sort of documentation. The ongoing part of the process, yeah, that's the more challenging part I found as well. Like you said, they're in the moment. They might actually be talking to the customers. Now we're going back to that earlier segment about being transparent. So the furthest thing from their mind at that point is documentation, but maybe that's a tomorrow thing, right? Like come back at it with a night of sleep, make sure that it's on your agenda for tomorrow, that you close that out, right? And then, like you said, you make it better for the next person behind you. And luckily I've been blessed with a lot of good teams that would try to do that. And then when you find it, right, maybe it's not totally accurate. Well, just turn over and hop the person and go, oh, this is what I meant and where I was going. Let's make sure it makes sense. Like all of those things are hard things for, to train and ingrain. But once you can get them there to a certain point, and the documentation just becomes better, and then the customers are happier on top of that. So yeah, power of documentation. So, going into one of my favorite segments, we're talking about declining things now. So what should IT leaders be declining more often?
The false urgency, because within IT, you think everything is urgent. You get that ticket in front of you, you get the screaming person, who's everything's on fire. I need this right now. And a lot of things, they're not urgent. Every problem is urgent to every person having the problem. But and that's where service level agreements and things like that come into play, where you got to be able to compartmentalize them and put them in different segments. Like, yes, this is important, your whole business is down. This is an irritation because you're having to do a workaround, but you can still do your normal job. And not jumping on everything, because if you jump on everything as an urgent issue, then the true urgent issues get watered down and kind of fall to the wayside. And so just that false urgency is just hard for, especially somebody new in the IT field, to kind of grasp. But even just being here as long as I have in the IT world, you want to fix that problem when it's in front of you. If you know you can fix it, you want to fix it, but it may not be the most urgent thing just because that person thinks it's urgent to them. Still get the problem fixed. But then just trying to weed through that. But a lot of that just comes from just being seasoned, and just being on the job for a while and just being able to see that, yes, okay, this can wait a minute, this one can't wait a minute, and just maneuvering that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all important at the end of the day, right? But knowing what things are priority, what things you can do versus somebody else or a junior or whatever that is, I totally agree. It comes with time. It comes with learning. The more that you have butt of the seat time, or the more of those fires where you realize, like, well, this one was actually worse than that one. Like you start to kind of figure that out. And when you hear them again and again, because to every customer, yeah, it absolutely is affecting you some way. Is it an actual emergency? You go back to the contracts, right? That's the best thing to look at and go, well, maybe we can do you a solid this time, but you don't have the contract if this happens again, right? That's always another fine line to walk, I think.
Right. It is. And explaining what those service level agreements are, and what constitutes, an elevated and a normal and a critical issue. Because, like we said, I mean, everything's critical to the person having the problem and being able to communicate that. And it goes back to the communication. As long as you're communicating through it, and if you do them a solid that one time, communicating that too, to say, yes, I'm going to go ahead and knock this out now. But the next time you have this same type of issue, you may have to wait, a little bit of time. That way you go ahead and set that, because if you just jump on everything at once, that one time you don't jump on it at once, even though you've done everything as far as that contract is concerned, you've failed because you've set up false hope at that point. You've told them this is how we're doing it. You've kind of trained them to get it that way. And as soon as they don't get it the way that you had train them to do it, then you failed on that. So I think doing it and doing that solid, that's great if the time is there and it needs to be done, but just communicating that, it just makes it a whole lot better, because at some point you're not going to be able to jump on that lower urgent issue, as quickly as you did this time.
Absolutely true. So what did you personally have to learn to say no to over the course of your career?
It goes back to that thinking everything is urgent and saying no to every single issue, because you'll turn around and you'll have so many things on your plate that all have to be done right now because they were, overpromised, so to speak. You can get them all done, but then there's really, if you're just constantly in the weeds and constantly looking at what we call, the Q1 type stuff, the stuff that's right here in front of you, you lose track of everything that is, that could be done to make these problems go away in the future. That stuff like goes back to kind of documentation that, those are important. You need to spend time on that. But if you're spending time on everything that you deem as urgent just because someone else deems that as urgent, you're really losing ground on that. And I think that goes into play with every IT person, because I mean, you're in the IT world usually because you want to help people and you want to solve problems. And so if there's a bunch of problems, you want to solve all those problems. If you think you can do it, you're going to want to do it. And that was the hardest thing for me to just break away from, to go, okay, I don't necessarily have to solve all of these problems. We have a team of people. There's a lot of people that can, help with this, that we can spread this love around, so to speak. Everybody can get a problem to solve. And so just peeling that back and just realizing that every problem is not my problem.
Yeah, I think that's classic IT mentality. We probably can fix a lot of them and probably could fix all of them. But once you start bundling all the balls together, they kind of start slipping out of the hands when you're trying to juggle them all at the same time. As you said, if I have a team, I can spread them out, and then all of the team, the more that they conquer, the better they get, the more skills that they learn, the faster we become as a team, the better we become as a team. I think that is a classic, I think, enter into IT mentality and a classic learning thing over time, because I can fix it.
Right. But if you're trying to fix everything, you're not delivering to that high level either. You're just getting the problem fixed. But if you just peel some of that back, do what you can, then you can deliver those solutions at a higher level. And then spreading it around, everybody is, producing at a higher level.
Learning to fix it from like the business point of view. Maybe it's a new coin or term we can come up with there.
Yep.
So is firefighting culture holding teams back?
I think so, because if you're just jumping on every little fire that comes up and not trying to get to what caused those small fires, because every fire starts with a small fire. And so, if you jump on every single one of them and just start trying to put them out, then you're not really trying to fix them in the future. You're still going to have those same fires come out. Kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where just because you put that Band-Aid on it or you fix it this one time, why does it keep coming back? You start looking at trends. And so if you, of course, put the fire out, that's right in front of you, get that person where they can work, but try to, do a little fire prevention as well and do something that's going to keep that fire from coming up the next time.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to that reactive sense in a way. Try to be not reacting to it, try to prevent it. Less
Right.
fires that way, hopefully. At the
That's
end of
it.
the
Fire
day.
prevention is what you want to try to focus your time on.
Absolutely. Save it for the actual things that broke. So let's go into a quick fire segment here, and then we'll go into some final questions, and then we'll get you on out of here. Starting off, firefighting or prevention?
Prevention, definitely.
Process or flexibility?
I would say process.
Tools or people?
Oh, that's a tough one there. That's hard to pick just one because, you could have the best tools in place, but if you don't have the people that can turn the dials and get everything set up the way you need to, those tools are really worthless. Anybody can buy tools, but, not having the expertise to be able to run the tools, what do they mean at the end of the day?
And I think that's a perfect way to put it. Speed or precision?
I think precision. That's going to trump speed because, because speed, you could be doing it wrong and just doing it fast.
Yep. Absolutely. I would totally agree with that. So, final questions. And I'm going to switch them up here in my order because you wrote a book and I think the audience would be thrilled to hear about it. I know that that's the title of the podcast that I'm going to put on this podcast, but if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about the book you wrote.
Yeah, it's called Built in the Trenches. And what it is, it's one I've been working on, and it's got just a little bit of everything I've picked up along the way. Some of it I've learned from some great leaders, that people that, I've kind of, been under their wing and just watched how they do things. And then some of it's just been things that, I've learned kind of on the fly and just, through different trials and tribulations, so to speak, in the leadership world. And so, yeah, it's really when I started writing it, I tried to kind of put myself in the mindset of a new leader, somebody who's recently moved into that role. Because like we said earlier, there's really no playbook for that. And so really any kind of nuggets that you can pick up from somebody that's been doing it, those are invaluable. And so, the more you can read and the more you can learn, and these are more just real world type things. These are things that I've really seen things that that have kind of helped me along the way. And some of them I wish I would have had years ago, and just already had this book to read myself. So kind of got out of my comfort zone a little bit by putting it out there. Something I never thought that I would do, as far as write a book and get it out there. But yeah, it's been published now, I guess about 3 or 4 weeks. It's been on Amazon. And doing pretty good, doing better than I thought it was going to do because just being a new author and not having that credibility out there yet from the writing world. But yeah, it's a great book, great read. So yeah, I recommend anybody in leadership. It's a great book to read, but especially if you've recently transitioned into a leadership role, and especially in the IT world, it's a great read. It's a lot of things, like I said, that I wish I would have had early on in my career.
And I would echo everything that you said because I think I mentioned it earlier that there was no book, right? So maybe this is the book. And I hope that new leaders, even if you're thinking about getting into leadership, I think that's a great idea. Read about that, see if that's something that you do want to do one day. And feel free to reach out because I'm a proponent of leadership can be better. Like there is more opportunity for leaders that doesn't exist today. There's a lot of titles I feel like out there, but true leaders, these are the kind of things that I'd like to see is spreading the wealth and you taking the time to put your knowledge into place and actually writing an entire story. I know what that's like because it's on my list to do and I haven't done yet and you have. So it says a lot right there. I definitely appreciate you doing that for the IT community.
Yeah, we're all learning at the end of the day. Regardless of what role you're in, whether you're a seasoned leader, whether you're recently moved into that, or even if you're, your ambition is to move into that, we've all got something to learn. And, if you're not continually learning something, you're just staying still. So always, just reach out to something, just find something and, make yourself better.
If you only knew the podcast I'm dropping tomorrow, right, of just continuously find something. I echo everything that you said. You're in a profession that demands to be better. Otherwise, it just passes you by. So just showing up isn't enough in the IT profession. Absolutely. We all need to show up. but learn something. Learn a little bit more. Learn it appropriately. Balance your time. Don't do crazy things that I've done in my career, but absolutely learn something along the way. And there are great people out here. Just met one of them on the other side of this that you can reach out to and give you great advice on how to do those things. So speaking of that, what is one piece of advice that you would give to future IT leaders?
Continuous improvement, just what we were talking about. I mean, always try to better yourself, because if not, I mean, it's going to leave you in the dust. So, and just as fast as things are changing now, if you don't stay on the cutting edge of it, and just staying out there to find out what's coming around, what's coming down the pike, it's going to leave you behind. So yeah, continuous improvement.
Absolutely. We just had a little mini segment on it. So one thing business leaders misunderstand about IT.
Well, it kind of circles back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, where it's not a cost center. Look at it more as a strategic partner for your business, regardless if it's an internal IT team or an external IT team, and don't view it as just a cost center. I mean, just change that mindset of viewing it where this is what we need to make our business better and to make our people better.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of changing that narrative. I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, IT and security, whatever you quantify IT as, all of that can be a cost savings. It can be a cost enabler in a lot of cases, especially if you get IT involved with the business early. Business drives the business, but IT can find the things that maybe nobody else knows to ask. You might not know to ask that question, but it might ping our brains and go, hey, did you think about blah? And all of a sudden now you're doing it more efficiently, less, maybe less people altogether, whatever it is. That's where we can actually add value to the business on top of protecting the business. So I absolutely agree with everything you've said so far.
And task your IT team also with helping to make it more efficient. Just kind of help cover those costs. If it's an internal IT team, especially, it's like, what can you bring to the table to move that business further along? And that'll spark some ideas too, of ways or things that we could purchase to put in place to just move us a little bit further down the road, and maybe cut out some things that we're doing that's just that we're spending a lot of money on that we can do a lot cheaper and more efficient by using technology and tools that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, the more educated you make your IT team about the business itself, that is not a negative thing at all. Matter of fact, I've found that my team stopped asking me so many questions about why over and over, because now they understand. So then their minds shift from the why to trying to be creative to solve the problems. And now you're driving huge value because they're being creative about, well, we could solve it 1, 2, 3 different ways. And now we're pitching to the business which one sounds the best, which one costs the most, the least, whatever. And that's a totally different conversation altogether. I could not agree more.
It is. IT is not a liability anymore, like it was viewed for so long.
It is not. So with that, well, we're coming to the end here. So Chris, I really appreciate you joining me. Where can everybody reach out to you or connect with you after this podcast?
LinkedIn is the best place to get a hold of me, and there's a link there to the book as well. So any questions, concerns, comments, be glad to answer anything, on the LinkedIn page.
Fantastic. I appreciate you joining me. With that, my closing thoughts is leadership is not built when things are easy. It's built when things go wrong, when pressure shows up, and when decisions matter, and when people are counting on you. So this has been Decline Invite, and the meeting is now over. Meeting adjourned. So I appreciate it. Chris, thank you profusely. I really appreciate you being in here. I really appreciate you giving your perspective on IT. And man, I just found somebody like-minded, and I think I found a friend and a connection along the way. So
yes,
thank
I
you
enjoyed
much.
it. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Decline Invite out. Take care, everyone.